I'm always interested in how people get involved in the research that they do. So I think that would be my first question, to know how did you get into the topic of meaning and meaning research?
Well, thank you. First, the pleasure is all mine to be able to have a conversation with you about this. The way I got started with my interest in meaning was thinking about all of the parts of life and living that people seem to take for granted. It takes a lot for all of us to get through life sometimes, and maybe it even seems overwhelming or too much to think about. But I felt like, as a kid growing up and as an adult coming of age during the latter years, I guess, of the Cold War, the Reagan era, it seemed like we just ignored a lot of the maybe responsibility, but also the possibility in our lives just by going from one distraction to the next. So it seemed to me that there was something important in us as a species, as a culture, that could really be brought to light or even flower if we began to ask, really, what is it that can we do with our lives? What do we want out of life? What are the full range of possibilities within us? And really, what does it mean just to be a person who's capable of asking the question, what is it all about for us? As I explored that idea in lots of different ways through just being curious, I found that there were some real connections with the work of Viktor Frankl, coming at it from a very different position, a much more serious position really, where, of course, in Frankl's life, having had his entire family and much of his life devastated by the inhumane cruelty of the war and of the concentration camps and of the horrible pieces of the worst of humanity that he directly experienced, and still coming through that thinking, if you ask yourself what is it that you really can do in life, or what's being asked of you in life, then you gain a power and a perseverance to get through and really, in the end, and most importantly, contribute to something that we all share in, this huge human project of trying to somehow make ourselves better than the roots of where we're at.
Good. So how would you then explain the concept of meaning, if you had to define it in your own way, in your words, your field of research?
I mean, it's a really good question. I think that the first two things that pop into people's mind are different from the way I would look at it. So the first thing is the meaning of life. You know, is there any purpose to the universe? Is there a God? Are there many gods? What happens after we die? Does my grandmother in heaven look down on me? Or whatever it is, these huge questions about what is the fundamental nature of reality. I don't study that. I don't think we can scientifically study that. And although personally I'm engaged with those thoughts, I think the role that I have in my job is to be as scientific as I can. So that means anything I can't get data on goes away. The next thing that people, I think, gravitate towards when they think about meaning is that meaning automatic will be that sense that my life is meaningful, that I know what I'm going to do with my life, and that's part of it, but meaning also captures the sense that I don't know what I'm doing with my life and I don't have a sense of meaning. So really it's not just the good side of meaning, that life is abundant and full of possibility and reward. It's also the potential for people to feel despair and feel empty of meaning and, you know, without rudderless in their lives. So when we break it down into the concepts that we use to study and measure what a person experiences with regard to meaning, then that's where we really start to see the psychology, the science of psychology and meaning. And it seems to come down to three basic processes that the human mind works with. So the first is what we refer to variously as either comprehension or coherence, the sense that I understand my life in the context of the world. I know who I am. I just have like a map, you know, or even a story for my life, and it makes sense to me, for good or bad. Some people have really dismal life stories that they feel they must lead. They're fated to doom even. But a lot of people have a pretty nice sense. The world's a good place, I'm a pretty good person. That leads then to the second piece, which is the sense of significance, that there's something worthwhile about me. I have some inherent value in my life. Somewhere out there, there's a place for me either contributing or just playing my role, and that makes everything come together in a worthwhile fashion. So we call that significance. So along with significance and comprehension, then the third piece is, I think, more recognizable to most people, and that's purpose. Having this feeling that there's one, or maybe even more than one, really highly valued, long-term goal that's personally expressive and helps us organize our behavior and our thinking about what we really want to accomplish in our lifetimes. And one of the interesting things about the way we think about purpose is that it's not a grocery list. You don't check off your purpose and say, oh, you know, I'm turning 46 this year. I must be done with my purpose in life now. I'm done. You know, it's really much more open-ended, and it's, you know, it can shift over time, but it seems to be powerful for people to have a sense that they're really trying to work towards something big in their lives, however they see that.
So it's a journey that you're explaining.
Yeah, I like to think of purpose as like an anchor we throw into our future. You know, it keeps us linked to something that is yet to be, yet to come, and gives us the sense that the future is important to us as well, and that we can keep moving forward, even though right now might be hard.
This links to my next question, which is, why do you think meaning is so important? How can it help us to have meaning?
Another great question, because part of the answer to that is that it's so important because we literally cannot escape it. So if we look at meaning in just little ways, we're making meaning all the time. For us to have a conversation requires huge levels of processing of what do you mean by your question, what are you looking for, what might people who are curious about this video want to see from it, am I saying anything that means something, or is it all gibberish? Just the idea that as we go through life, our brains are just constantly making meaning. And meaning in that sense then is just the link of representations and relationships and interpretations of things that happen around us. So part of the power of meaning is that we can't ever not make meaning. What we're really trying to help people orient towards is, how can we more consciously make meaning, and how can we more consciously make the type of meaning that leads to enriching lives for us and also helps us enrich the collective, all of us. So what meaning seems to do is it takes, in some sense, charge of that process where we're actively interpreting and really putting into the world our sense of the best that our lives can be. When you look at all the research that's out there, just consistently people who say that they're finding that sense of meaning, a continuity in their lives, or even a positive sense that their lives matter, they're just doing better. And if we think about what that really implies, is that as people's lives happen, they have a sense of the past, of who they are in the present, and of where they want to go in the future, and that momentum seems to them to be worthwhile.
I'm curious about some interesting research findings, perhaps, and practical implications thereof in then this process of making meaning.
Yeah, well, I think we have more interesting research findings than we have practical applications so far. One of the tricky pieces about meaning is that it seems to occur over a long period of time. And I'll first sort of give a caveat that makes it difficult to study. If I take a snapshot of meaning in your life right now, or meaning in my life right now, that's important for how I'm doing right now, but it's really hard to figure out where that came from, how it evolved, and really exactly specifically what that implies for what you'll do next week, or those sorts of pieces. But over the long term, you see some pretty astounding results. One of the most eye-catching sets of results is the fact that across a few different studies now, if you compare people who have a strong sense that their lives are meaningful and purposeful with those who feel like their lives are meaningless and purposeless, you see a quite significant advantage in terms of how long they live. So there's a mortality and a longevity advantage to meaning. In one study, they controlled for a lot of different factors that impact longevity, including neurotic and negative personality traits, chronic medical conditions, even income, and still found that there was 50-something% mortality advantage for people over a 5-year period of time who had a lot of meaning versus not very much. So that ends up being quite significant. It also implies that meaning has its strongest benefits over time, yes, rather than right now. So if there was some magical or very clever little routine I could put you through to give you a strong sense of meaning right now, it might be beneficial right now, but it seems to be the case that meaning wants to be a consistent, investable resource. I think your previous question anticipated the future of meaning research. We really want to understand why meaning is important and makes a difference, and how we can turn that information into actionable information that people can apply. So some of the most exciting research is taking a look at the links with health, particularly in the context of how do people maintain their drive when it's a chronic health condition that has very difficult ramifications. As you might know, in many diseases, it's not you take a pill for 2 weeks and you're done. So can meaning help bolster people's morale and their adherence to difficult and time-consuming regimens for health? Whether that is in a critical medical case scenario, or what if maybe meaning is actually part of what helps us get to the gym on a cold day to do a little workout, or say no to dessert, or whatever it is that we feel like is going to make us a healthier person. On the practical side, there's a lot of interest in coming up with some sort of system where we can help people proceed through finding and clarifying meaning and purpose in their lives. And this is certainly an area where we're busy in our lab, but other people are also busy working with specific populations, such as cancer survivors, people who've lost loved ones, but trying to figure out what are those processes that people can engage with to build that meaning resource over time.
Thank you very much for sharing with us your views on meaning, but also how you see this panning out in the future.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for the time.